And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today we're looking at the most important move that the Washington Commanders need to make here this offseason. And so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I think that the most important move for the Washington Commanders is going to be what they do with their own free agents. I think that actually was the most important part to getting this Washington Commanders team moving in the right direction and really getting this team to winning football again. I think that the bottom line is that the Washington Commanders made great decisions in last free agency and bringing in players that actually changed the identity of this team. And now it's a winning identity. So that means that now Adam Peters and this front office have to make some tough decisions because I think it's clear that we're not going to be able to bring everybody back. And so I think that that is something that has been relayed. I think that that's understandable. And so I've already said on a couple shows here, I think that Bobby Wagner is a player I'd love to bring back. Zach Ertz is another player, Jeremy Chin, Dante Fowler Jr. Those are just a couple of players that I think that absolutely the Washington Commanders bring back. Now, aside from that, it's going to be challenging for what direction the Washington Commanders go there in free agency with their own free agents because, a lot of these players were definitely responsible for changing to this winning mindset that we have here. And, you're not bringing everybody back, but you want to make sure that you keep enough of those players there that you can continue to build upon that and really open up the door now for when you go out there and you're aggressive in free agency, which we do expect for this team to be to try to maximize this window for Jaden Daniels. It all fits. And that's what we saw in the last season. And we need to see that continue here into this next season. So I think that this offseason, much like this last offseason, as far as our own free agents and who we're bringing in, that's going to be probably the most important step before we even start to even explore a trade or even the draft. And so with that being said, I want to shift focus now and look at the NFL draft because I think that, we've talked a lot about, what the Washington Commanders could possibly do. I do think that they're going to be in play for a major trade, whether that's going to be Myles Garrett, whether it's going to be Trey Hendrickson, just a couple of players that we have talked about on the show. Could it be a Devontae Adams? I'm just throwing out players that we talked about. Like, I do think the Washington Commanders are going to take a swing if it makes sense, with going out there and getting that player. But aside from that, Adam Peters has said that he wants to really build via the draft. And I think that that is, the right way to go. I think it's something that really gives you the longevity for your football team. And I think that's the bottom line. We know that you can get players via free agency and also trade that are going to help your team. But for the long haul, you need to go out there and you need to draft a player, right? Because for the first time in a long time, the Washington Commanders, they prioritize getting a quarterback, and we have a franchise quarterback. So we have that window now, right? And we got that via the draft. And so now you need to do that in other positions. And so the Washington Commanders are really trying to build in the draft, which I think that they are. We know that they have several picks in this draft, and counting that they don't make a major trade of those picks, starting with, just the first rounders, right? Looking at what direction that this team could possibly go. I have them definitely picking up, a defensive player. I think certainly addressing the offensive line is going to be important. I think the running back, wide receiving room, I think that those are all important aspects. And I think that that's something that the Washington Commanders could address. And so I want to start defensively what the Washington Commanders could do. And so, one of the mock drafts that I took a look at, and I must say I do like this player, and I'm not sure that he's been mentioned just yet, but it is going to be JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State University. I think that he is definitely a player that I liked. I think that with him, he has great hands. And when I say great hands, he's terrific as far as intercepting the ball, had terrific, tape and just showing him batting down the football. And so has a lot of length with him as well. And I just love his ability to really drop back into like kind of a coverage scheme. And so that suggests to me, not only can he be an edge rusher for you, but maybe he's like a little bit of a hybrid of like, he was terrific at just getting to the quarterback, which I love that. So if you can generate some natural pressures without calling blitzes, and you can kind of throw him back there into some of those exotic kind of, blitzes and defensive schemes, like I definitely liked him as a player to definitely take a look at. And so definitely make sure you check him out. Another player that I think certainly could be pretty good, I think, out of the defensive, as far as defensively for this team, edge, and that's James Pierce Jr. I think that he's been linked to the Washington Commanders in a couple mock drafts that I've seen out of Tennessee. And I think that really the biggest thing for him is just the speed. I think that the speed and his ability to kind of jump off of the ball, I love that about him. And so that suggests to me that with that speed, hopefully he's able to get up, set the edge quickly. And then also, too, as far as maybe generating some negative plays with that speed, maybe that's a player that the Washington Commanders would certainly consider if they're looking at just the edge and defensively that way. I think that those are two options for them. And so next up, when we start to look at the offensive line, I think that that is very important for this football team. And in fact, it might be one of the most important really to address here in this offseason, because I think that, teams now have seen Jaden Daniels for the year. I think that they're going to defend him a lot differently. And that suggests, man, that you're going to need to maximize that protection. And we really need to get, I think, more just geared towards playing towards our strength, which is, I think, dominating the time of possession. And to do that, you really have to dominate the line of scrimmage, and you need to be able to open up running lanes for your running back. You need to continue to maximize protection for Jaden Daniels and eliminate that pressure so he has time to really cut up defenses. And so that would suggest that you would go after an offensive lineman. And so I don't see the Washington Commanders making a move like that via trade. I think it's something that's more going to happen in the draft. A player that has been linked to us via mock drafts has been Josh Simmons of Ohio State University. And what I like most about him in his tape, it was his ability to get to the second level. Like, he's great at giving the first block and then getting to the second level. So that was something that I loved, especially when you're trying to create some space and some extra, running lanes for your running back or quarterback that is on that design run. If he can get a good block initially and then get you to the second level, our playmakers are able to do, what they're able to do in the secondary. That's going to lead to some chunk plays. And so Josh Simmons, he's a player that I definitely liked just kind of looking at him. Another player that they could possibly go with, once again, out of Ohio State is Donovan Jackson. I think that Donovan Jackson, I like his tape a lot, and I liked him a lot more as a pass protector. I think I was looking at some of his tape where he was, just blocking for C.J. Stroud and things like that. And so I like that. I definitely like the pass protection there. Solid in the run blocking and things like that. I think that arguably all these players are going to get better. I think that that's something maybe he does get better at, but I think that those are a couple players that maybe the Washington Commanders could maybe pivot to if they're looking to go with the offensive line. Next up, we're going to be looking at the wide receiver position. And so there's two wide receivers that really I've liked them. I've talked about them a little bit here before, but I want to go back in and touch on it again. But Luther Burton, I think that is a player out of Missouri that could be a player that maybe the Washington Commanders like to go with. Look, with Luther Burton III, actually, look, he's a player that he had, 61 receptions this last season, 676 yards, 6 TDs. He averaged 11.1 yards was his average. But I think what I liked most about him is he reminds me a lot of Zay Flowers. Now, he had a better year in 2023. He had 86 receptions for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. touchdowns, but still, I saw enough there on tape that just shows, man, that man, he brings a lot of swagger. And I think that that's something that this team would like. I think he's a player that certainly can win over the middle of the field. And I think he also could maybe take the lid off of the defense as well. Like, I think he's going to be a guy that if we want to attack vertically like we want to, I think that Luther Burden III is a player that could do that. Another player that I liked at wide receiver is going to be a young man out of Texas. I've talked about him before as well, and that's Matthew Golden. And so, look, I like Matthew Golden a lot. And you talk about home run hitter, like he's definitely a home run hitter. Here's a player, look, he had 58 receptions, 987 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Now, his average was 17 yards an average, right? And so just talked about the fact that he's a home run hitter. And I think the Washington Commanders would love to have him. And I think he's definitely going to be available. If he's not taken in round 1, I think that he's definitely somebody that the Washington Commanders maybe can get in round 2, hopefully. And so that is 2 wide receivers that I think maybe the Washington Commanders can take a look at. Luther Burden III out of Missouri, and then you have Matthew Golden out of Texas. I think that those are 2 players to take a look at. And so lastly, as far as the running back, and I think that that is certainly a position that the Washington Commanders should address. I think that, love Brian Robinson Jr., love Austin Eckler, but I think that Brian Robinson Jr., look, he dealt with some injuries. I love Austin Eckler. I think he's more of a perimeter runner. And then you have Brian Robinson Jr., he's more of the interior runner. But I think that you can get a player out of the draft that maybe can do a little bit of both. And I like this player a lot, especially with the speed that he showed, the smooth running style, and that's Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. So, look, I know he played behind a very good offensive line, I think, in Iowa, but, man, I was super impressed with him. And I think that, man, he might be a steal if the Washington Commanders can get him, because just the way that he's able to take off an open field. I know, look, there's not going to be another Saquon Barkley, but I think the difference for the Eagles and what they had with Saquon Barkley was his ability to be a home run hitter. And Caleb Johnson, he shows that maybe he can be a home run hitter. This last season, 240 carries, over 1,000 yards, 1,537 to be exact. He had 21 TDs, but 6.4 in average. And like I said, if you go look at his tape, I thought he was spectacular in the open field. Now, he's not going to be a guy that's just necessarily going to run over you, but he's also a player that doesn't go down after the first hit of contact, which is good too, because I think you're going to need to be able to definitely do that at the next level. So anyway, let me know what you're thinking about some of these draft picks that I have recently just kind of thrown out here, if the Washington Commanders maybe pivot in those directions. And then also too, let me know what you're thinking as far as what's the most important step for the Washington Commanders this offseason, because I do think the foundation is everything with this team. Because look, I want to see this team not be good just for a year, not be good just for 2 years, but I think that it needs to be in a situation much like what we see with the Kansas City Chiefs and what they were able to do in maximizing the window with Patrick Mahomes, or they're still maximizing it, right? You see that they've been to, 3 consecutive Super Bowls here. Even though they didn't win that one, I would love to see this team elevate to get back to where they were in the late 80s and the early 90s. Just thinking about Joe Gibbs, what he did in his 12 seasons before he retired in 93. Look, he had taken the team to 4 Super Bowls in which we won 3 of those. I'm hoping that the Washington Commanders can really set that type of identity, and it starts with how you continue to really build in free agency, and it starts with your own free agents. So anyway, let me know what you're thinking. Go Commanders, and I will see you on the next one. All right, peace.